They had started hunting him a few years ago. Not that it had ever really been anything more than a minor annoyance. He was fine with it. Just a bunch of lunatics that wanted him for why, really. He'd never given it much thought beyond his concern that it would be very unhealthy for him to fall into the hands of cultists, especially those known to be enamored with sacrifice and other nasty habits. Unfortunately, when they rotated groups into his term for shore leave, well, there wasn't much he could do about it. He smiled at them, waving, the fiends not even bothering to hide, staring at him unblinkingly. One of the men sitting at the table with him, an acquaintance he had made during his last shore leave, not quite a friend, turned around, growling at them. The man actually growled. What a delightful person. He turned back to Adeline, his face dark, and said, "How you put up with them? Would have killed them during the tide long ago. Or at least got them in the night. Tried both, didn't work. They just said more the next time," he said, still smiling as he took a pull of his drink. It tasted rather bitter. He'd specifically asked for the pumpkin-roasted lager, and he sighed in anticipation of the conversation he would need to have with the lad at the counter. "What's the matter? Someone spinning your drink again?" he asked, grinning. Levin wasn't a particularly handsome man, on account of all the scars, but women seemed to prefer that these days. If he was to guess which of the five at the table might have the best chance of taking someone home for a dance, or even better, home, well, his bet would be on him. "If I recall correctly," he said dryly, "that was you who did it last time." "Well, I didn't do it this time." "No one did it this time," said Adeline, rising from the table. Some of the cultists moved as if to begin following him, but he motioned towards the counter, letting them know not to bother. They didn't believe him, of course. They never did, but when he glanced back after making his way to the bar, they had taken their seats again. The serving boy at the bar, not quite yet a bartender, noted towards him as he approached. The thought passed through his mind reflexively that he was too young to be in the first defense, but then, of course, they all had been too young at one point or... "Yes, Master Adeline? Can I help you?" he said, his cheeks rosy like a babe. He wanted to pinch them, so he did. "Master..." Dragging the boy's head low, he put the drink to the boy's mouth, letting him taste it for himself. "Does this taste like pumpkin roast lager to you?" The boy's garbled protest came out, and Adeline took the mug away, letting him catch his breath. "No, Master Adeline." "Then why am I still holding it?" "Yes, master. Right away," he said, taking the mug and hastily stealing away to replenish it with the correct beverage. No one batted an eye at the small incident. It was typical of things around here. He was irritated that he even had to go so far. The boy brought his drink back in short order, and he took it from him, licking his lips, putting it to his mouth, and... A loud siren blared its warning wail, the bar going silent in response, then moving all in synchronization. He sighed, putting the mug down, the boy already moving past him, hand on his sword belt. They were all armed, of course. To go anywhere while in the first defense without some kind of a weapon was simply asking to be killed by an abyssal fiend. The barriers of the shore were made to keep out things like shadowstalkers, shards of the Leviathan, spineflingers, chasm slicers, and the like. The smaller but still deadly could slip through if careful attention was not paid, which was rare, but it could happen. He could remember waking up to the sound of his door creaking open, the drip hound sniffing inquisitively before he had reached for his knife, hitting it square between the eyes, and he had only been 15. The men at his table were waiting for him as he walked over leisurely, a close eye on the cultists who took their time rising from the table. So that's how they wanted to play it, huh? They left the bar, easy to do as it was of the outside variety, and began walking down the public lane to be herded towards the destination. Levin walked up beside him, growling at the robed men again, then saying, "Old Lioness said to meet him by Vanguard Park on the way to the shore. Though, we still haven't called out what zone to report to," he said, and then cursed, seeing the blockade up ahead. "I'm sure the wonderful lords of House Larian will let us know soon enough," he said, looking around. Most of the traffic towards the zone had already congregated to the main street, two black eyes up ahead directing it as they waited for their commands. A few demolition vehicles rolled by in a separate lane, turning down the path towards Defense Zone 6. He closed his eyes, making a mental route in his mind. If he was right, it'd be dicey, but fine. Nothing like a little illegal combat to warm up before a tide. "Attention! Attention, citizens of the First Defense," came the voice through a powerful projector, like someone yelling right in his ear. Some of the children who were newer to the First Defense covered their ears in pain, but most stood unflinching. He mouthed the words right along with the announcement. It was always the same script. "All citizens not exempt by a command of the Free Lords, the right of sacrifice, or House Larian are to report to Defense Zone 6. All citizens not exempt by... It went on, droning the command, and the flow of traffic resumed as the black eyes moved aside. No one was in a particular rush, however, as there were a few things in the world less enjoyable than fighting a tide. The dark god of the mountain has been annoyingly active as of late, he complained, stretching his arms languidly, tapping a woman on her shoulder by accident, she glaring at him. He gave her a winning smile, and she grunted in return. What an enchanting individual. This is what, the fifth tide in the last 2 weeks? Thought he was supposed to be quiet this time of year. Word is that the most recent black eye recruits didn't kill all the brood mothers they were supposed to, said Levin, as they passed the two black eyes, the man's unnatural gaze passing over them. There wasn't much that gave Adeline pause, but the feeling of those black holes sliding their focus over him did make him reconsider his plans. Makes sense. Apparently it was the highest survival rate in 100 years. Cowards, said Huger, a burly man a full head taller than himself, and Adeline was above average. Should have just stayed here with us instead of disgracing the name, or at least died trying. Just 'cause your brother's a black eye don't mean you get to act like one, Huger, chuckled Levin, and the big man's face went flush. The cultists weren't far behind, easy to pick out in the crowd. Normally, they tried to hide themselves, and that was worrying. That meant they had a plan, and he hated it when they had plans. He looked around at the men he had befriended. Could they be trusted? He'd known them all for a year or more now. Surely the Fang worshippers weren't that committed to getting him. But he couldn't discount the possibility. Remember this well, boy, said the man who had beat him, taught him, told him he was his brother. When I am gone, you must defend yourself. When I am gone, you must trust no one. If you survive until you can claim the right of departure, then perhaps you will be worthy of our father. He wasn't interested in his father. Not when he had abandoned he and his mother, but survival was something he had somewhat of a passion for. The men had slowly shifted their positions as they walked, encircling him. Maybe they were just trying to protect him. Maybe they were loyal. And if you believe that he was a fool. An alleyway split off to the side, a break in the path towards Vanguard Park. They took it as a group, heading down a winding hill, constrained tightly by the walls of the buildings. It wasn't dirty, however. There was little that was dirty in the Free State, no matter where it was. Adeline wasn't under the illusion that it was for the benefit of the people, however. To defend the tide, you needed to be healthy, and mitigating the chance one could fall ill however they could was a high priority for the Free Lords. He didn't need to glance back to know that they were still following him. Their gaze was easy to detect for him now. He'd gotten quite good at feeling when they were watching. There's a few more than usual, said Levin, glancing back at them. I told you, if you kill a few, they just send more. It's 15 of them back there, Aide, by my count. The man sounded nervous, and worse, he sounded genuine. At least he wasn't one of the few who would betray him. He almost felt bad that he was likely going to have to use him as a human shield. They reached Vanguard Park in short order, the orders repeating across the first defense once more. They would have to get this over with quickly. If they were caught outside of the defense zone by the Black Eyes, they'd be lucky if they were allowed to keep their heads, let alone the rest of their bodies. Can they really make people fly? Whispered another one of the group, a thin man with thinner morals named Halberd. He had no idea why. It was a terrible, stupid name. As insane as they tend to be, I've yet to come across one that wasn't self-aware enough to avoid using the shadow. I think most of them aren't that keen to meet their god so quickly, said Adeline, though there was a reason he always made sure old Lion kept a good watch on his brother's gift. The day will come when you will need this, said his brother, pressing a small white box into his hands. He moved to open it, but his brother pressed down firmly upon the top, wagging a finger. You will know when the moment is right. Do not open it before then. What fantastic advice. It would be better if he knew what it was for or what it could do, not a cryptic, vague message that might lead him to not opening it at all and dying because of it. Nothing he could do about that, however. Searching for both his brother and his father had proven futile, like most things in his life. He would just have to figure out as he went, which, luckily, he was quite adept at doing. They were in the open air now, frighteningly vulnerable. Vanguard Park was a handsome place, and well it should be, honoring all of the fallen defenders of the first defense. Statues of pure shadow glass dotted the grounds, depicting valorous acts by nameless commoners. Old Lion was there by the Ebony Mausoleum, home to the honored dead of the last defense. Seeing them, he stood up. Seeing the cultists, he unsheathed his weapon. In unison, Adeline heard the others bare their weapons, Levin and the men all using short swords except for Halberd, who actually did undo a claspable halberd, bearing no shield. He didn't reveal his hand just yet. Surprise was his greatest advantage in a fight. People tended to underestimate him, but that's why he was alive, and they weren't. I see you've brought a few more guests than I anticipated, said old Lionel, his gnarled hand passing him the gift. And me without my apron. We don't have much of a window this time, old-timer, he said, turning about to face the oncoming group. I know, he said, sighing, then turning to a whisper. Anyone I should be watching? All of them, he replied simply. You don't like to make things easy, Adeline. It's a talent, he said, smiling. One I'd wish you forget, the old man grumbled. The cultists fanned out wordlessly, none of their stares ever leaving Adeline. His smile faltered a little, seeing that, but then he took a calming breath and adjusted it. At the end of the day, they were just men with flesh and blood, no matter what god they served. Their smooth satin robes, black as night, whisking softly across the ground and bearing the mark of the dark god, a fang just barely submerged within a lake, a mountain in the background, were meant to inspire fear. If he let their bald heads, poorly chosen apparel, and unblinking stares affect him, then they were winning. And for some reason he never quite understood, being a very humble person, well, he hated losing. Glory to Lord Seren in the Dark Mountain, they began, drawing their knives. They shone with the same sheen that the statues did. Shadow glass. That was decidedly not good. Glory to Lord Seren in the Dark Mountain, they repeated, walking slowly towards them. Freaks, muttered Huger, though his arm quivered and his voice quavered. He never once looked back towards Adeline. That's two on my side, I think, he thought to himself. The man never looked back like the other three, Howard and the twin brothers who he could never remember the names of, settling for Lumpty and Frumpty. Stupid names for stupid men. Adeline let the cultists draw closer, focused more on the traitors close to him. He walked up slowly to the small line they had formed, nodding and gesturing with a flick of the eyes to old Lionel, who he wanted dead. And the man gave no acknowledgement, but Adeline knew he knew. In one long stride, he stepped forward, quickly slicing both of his daggers wide, opening a brilliant crimson line across the back of Halberd and Lumpty's neck, and he saw Frumpty have a great fall, a moment later. The other two turned in shock, but Adeline sprung forward at the cultists, jumping over the men in the midst of their death throes to sling a hidden blade at a cultist on the far left, taking him in the throat, and he twirled the handles of his daggers, flowing into a cyclone of razor. The two nearest cultists sliced at him, but too hesitantly, with not enough carelessness. When others saw him fight, they thought him mad or suicidal. And neither was completely true. He just knew what he was capable of. Ducking and stepping, and so quickly, so effortlessly some might have thought him dancing, he whirled around their clumsy attacks, cutting off a finger before deftly swapping his weapons for theirs, jamming the knives of the Leviathan into their chests, then jumping backwards, skipping into a handstand, grabbing his daggers before pushing off, flipping into the air and landing with a flourish. He hadn't even broken a sweat. Wasted energy, son, said the old man, flicking his eyes in annoyance before looking at the now uncertain zealots. It's all necessary. Even the handstand? The flip? Oh, those are the most important parts. It's all about theater. Why, look at them, he said, pointing one of the daggers toward the cultists, and some actually ducked out of the way as if he was going to throw it. The get-up, the hair, the chanting. It's all about being more than you are, Lionel. The old man squinted. But you're already a fool, Hade, he said. Yes, but they don't know that, he said, smiling broadly. A lone, bone-chilling house split the sky, and Adeline's smile faltered, the old man going straight back next to him for a moment before growling in response. The cultists abandoned him reflexively, some of them torn between wanting to continue fighting and searching for the incoming threat. Levin and Huger ran up to his side, knuckles white as they gripped their weapons, eyes darting around. Shadowstalkers slipping through the front line? How long has it been since that's happened? Asked Levin. A couple of years for me, said Huger gruffly, the man sounding not as scared as he looked. Haven't seen it happen once until now, said Adeline, wondering where it would strike from. The howl of the Shadowstalker could only be heard by the one it hunted. One, as in singular. There were exactly 16 of them that he would consider alive, with the potential of there being even more if the others hadn't done them the honor of dying. The fact that every single one of them heard the howl was not good for them, especially since the bastards could travel through shadows, reappearing behind you and dragging you into a void of endless razors and gaping maws. He'd seen the remains of men and women, even children, killed that way. It was not a kind death. Told you, damn cowards, the lot of them, said Huger. Well, You'd better hope those cowards come to our rescue, because I've seen better odds than this, said old Lione, the man closing his eyes and whispering a quick prayer to the dark god. It is ironic to pray to the very same god responsible for the creation of the things on their way to kill us, isn't it? Asked Adelaine. Don't blaspheme, boy, said the old-timer. Leviathan does this to strengthen us. You know that. Can't really be all that strong when you're a mishmash of blood and bones, eh? Just focus on the damned dogs, Adelaine. He laughed shakily, wondering how he was supposed to do that when the sun cast shadows just about everywhere around them. Spread out, boys. I'd rather not die because we gave the things a free way to our throats, he said, and they obeyed immediately, their shadows no longer touching, at least. Oi! He called out to the cultists. I've a feeling that your lord wants you dead as much as me. I think we can call a truce for now, right? A shadow stalker, as large as a carriage, sprung from the shadows and snatched one of the zealots, disappearing without so much as a sound, the rest of them whirling in response. Oh, he added cheerfully, you might want to spread out. The bigger the shadow, the easier it is for the larger ones to jump through. He saw Levin's shadow ripple, and he tackled the man out of the way towards a nearby statue, a Sidrophan child poking a shard in the ankle, as a shadow stalker as large as a horse jumped through, missing him and landing soundlessly on the grass around them. It was pale white, with glowing, pupilless eyes that were yellow and a thin mane that ran along its spine the color of blood. It lunged at them while they were still recovering, and Adelaine pushed the man out of the way as hard as he could, the beast missing him with its open maw. It turned its head towards him with hateful eyes, but made the mistake of turning towards its prey. Simple-minded creatures. That was the only advantage he had over them. He slashed at its ankles viciously, biting into the bone, but not quite slicing the limb off as he had wished. He should have grabbed the damn light-forsaken shadow lad. It stumbled slightly, but still leapt forward, taking Levin by the throat, the man making a gurgle of protest before disappearing into the ground. Adelaine grimaced, but his own shadow stalker made its appearance, using the nearby statue's shadow to travel through, the force of its emergence sending them both flying into the air. He tumbled along its spine some 15 feet in the air, they hovering together for a moment before beginning to hurtle back towards the ground. He scanned the ground below quickly, noticing the cultists' numbers were severely reduced. Huger's arm pouring blood as the man staggered to the ground, ashen-faced, a dead shadow stalker the size of a wolfhound next to him. Old Lione was still alive, of course, cupping his mouth atop the corpse of his shadow stalker, the size of Huger. The mane, boy! Cut it along the mane! Adelaine twisted, gripping its mane tightly, and it howled in pain before whining pitifully as he planted his dagger into the top of its head, dragging it down along the mane, black blood splattering into his face. He tried to pull himself up along its body as it thrashed about, but the force of gravity was too much, and he felt agonizing pain shoot up his leg as they crashed to the ground together, rolling away from each other. It rose clumsily, the rest of its brethren leaping from the shadows to stalk the remaining 3 cultists who huddled together, shaking fearfully, and Adelaine tried to rise himself, but his right leg buckled. Broken, most likely. He took out the gift, moving to open it. This may well be the right time. He began to flex his fingers to open it, but something stopped him. You will know when the time has come. Well, this seems like a perfect time to me, brother, he said, baring his teeth and his daggers as the hounds of the dark bore down upon him, eyes blazing hunger and fury. Something gleamed in the air above it, however, hovering like a bright star, and he heard the old man sigh in relief, then yell, Move, boy! Move! Adelaine rolled with all his might, which wasn't much, but it was enough. A thunderous roar sundered the shadow stalker and the ground beside him as a human-shaped flash of pure darkness slammed down from the heavens, and he was thrown aside by the force of the landing. It stood atop the corpse without much concern, the other creatures howling before leaping in unison towards it, and it withdrew 2 sabers of shadow glass, the blades suspended along a thin line, and a sound like birds singing preceded the vibration of the blades, their song piercing the flesh of the hounds easily as it danced and tore through the beasts with the skill of a master, though Adelaine saw by the markings along his arm that he was a recent graduate of the Ebony Guard. The dispatching of the hounds was swift and efficient, and the Black Eye walked casually over to the cultists, the zealot shying away fearfully from the men. Remain here until a lord of House Larian arrives. You 3, he said, his voice surprisingly young. Come forward. He did not tell them to drop their weapons as they approached him from behind. They would be fools indeed to attack a lone Black Eye. It was said even a Spellblade might find themselves outmatched in single combat against one. Huger and Lione helped him rise, each placing one of his arms over their shoulders, Lione bearing a fresh, shallow gash along his arm, and Huger without an arm. They stopped a few yards short of the black eye, hesitant about getting any closer. He turned to them, sightless gaze settling on them, the black holes like chasms they would fall into if they were not careful. What is the meaning of this? Why have you not all reported to Defense Zone 6? The truth was the best option when dealing with Ebony Guard. They did not tolerate dishonesty. Well, these nice men here seem to have it out for me, so rather than risk death on the battlefield, I decided to settle things here, then make my way to the designated shore. Then the Shadow Stalkers arrived and, well, you know how that goes, I'm sure. He stepped close to Adeline, peering at him, and he tried to give the guard a winning smile, though he could feel it slipping as the man stared at him, unflinching. He nodded, then turned to the other two in turn. And you two corroborate this story? So say I, they replied in unison. Very well, he said, turning to the cultists, the blades whirring once again. At least I shall not need to disturb a lord for this. Wretches, your kind disgusts me. Have you any final words before your sentence is carried out? The black eyes were nothing, if not efficient. Glory to Lord Saren, they began to chant, though one turned and ran in earnest rather than die in solidarity. The black eye cut those who remained, their screams reverberating defiantly before their blood painted the grass, and the guard leapt across the grounds, covering perhaps 30 yards with the ease Adeline might have jumping over a puddle. The other man died out of earshot, but Adeline hoped his death was painful, though he knew the black eye would make it quick. The man turned back to them, tapping something on his side, and said, Attend your duty at the defense zone. You will be assigned stations considerate of your current disabilities. Dismissed, he finished, voice as clear as if he was standing a foot in front of them, jumping off towards the inner part of the first defense. Perhaps more creatures had slipped behind the defenses. They began limping to the defense zone together, the day still young. Just another wonderful day in the first defense, he muttered. The other two said nothing. They didn't need to. Any day you still drew breath was a good day, inside your fan.